Excelsior Music Publishing is proud to sponsor the Growing Band Director podcast. The new concert band and jazz ensemble music releases from Excelsior Music Publishing are here now and available from wherever you get your band music, featuring works of all levels from an incredible composer roster. Listen, browse, and get inspired at excelsiormusic.com. That's EXCELCIA music.com. Do you spend valuable time all year correcting students' hand position instead of focusing on the music? Thumb Gummy solves this. These simple, cost-effective teaching aids fit on trumpets and trombones to guide the right hand into proper position, reducing tension, improving form, and giving tactile feedback so students can focus on playing, not adjusting. It's easy to use, comfortable, and designed by teachers and players, not just for your beginners, but for older students as well. Join thousands of students and bands already seeing the difference. And keep an eye out for our new clarinet thumb rest coming soon. Visit thumbgummy.com to learn more. That's thumbgummy.com. Tuner Caddy is proud to sponsor the Growing Band Director podcast. The Tuner Caddy was created by Mark Casperson, a band director with over 38 years of experience. Like most of us, he was tired of dropped tuners, wasted time, and students fumbling with their gear. So he did what any passionate teacher would do. He invented a solution. Mark designed the original Tuner Caddy after testing 57 different versions. The classic model fits right onto most music stands, holds any tuner, and even has a pencil holder. Then he added the Student Pro, a slimmer, binder-friendly with magnets, so it sticks right to the wire stands. And now there's even the TCT60M, a full tuner and metronome combo that's transposable and includes a 6-foot mic. Super practical and more affordable than most other options out there. The best part is that these tools don't just help kids stay organized, they actually improve how we teach intonation and tone. Tuner Caddy is being used by some of the top programs in the country, from Texas to Virginia, and it's even been on stage at the Midwest Clinic and Music for All Festival. You can find Tuner Caddy at tunercaddy.com, at local retailers, or through Music and Arts, Sweetwater, and Premier Music Teaching Aids. They even offer support for educators writing grants. Check them out at tunercaddy.com. If you could take a moment and go to thegrowingbanddirector.com to give at least $5 or $3 a month, and it helps the content continue to be created for you to help our profession grow. Let's go back to our scheduled episode. Welcome back to the Growing Band Director podcast. This is episode number 269. I'm here with Matt Klohs. Matt, how are you?
I'm very well, Kyle. Good morning, and welcome to all your listeners.
Beautiful. As people can probably tell, you said good morning, and it's evening where I'm at. So you're coming from Perth, Australia. I'm coming from Maine in the US. This is the first time I've interviewed somebody on a different day. So this is a special moment for me. Thank you for being here.
Look, it's a great pleasure, and thanks so much for the invitation. The pursuit of teaching young musicians and running bands and creating great experiences for our people and our audiences is similar worldwide, but kind of different too. So it's going to be interesting to have a chat with you and sort of see where we get to.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about your time in the Royal Australian Navy Band. You said it's kind of similar as all the service bands around the world. Tell us a little bit about your experience there and how it might relate to other bands as well.
Okay, well, I'll briefly outline. I did 32 years altogether in the Navy Band, and I joined at 17 and 3 weeks of age, straight out of high school, and it was just the most incredible journey. It took me to 35 countries. I saw a couple of deployments to the Middle East, one in 2005 and one in 2016, doing concert tours, USO style tours. For the troops, both American troops and Australian and British troops. I had the privilege of being the only foreign national ever to be given command of a Royal Marines band in England in their 350-year history, which was a set of coincidences, I must admit. I was a newly qualified conductor, having been a flute piccolo specialist player for 16, 17 years or something. And I'd done my sort of 18-month conducting training course, and I got selected to go over to England on an exchange program with the Royal Marines. And while I was literally in the air on the Qantas flight flying over the Himalayas, the second leg is always Singapore to London direct. My colleague over there was playing soccer, was playing football on an AstroTurf, artificial turf pitch, and zigged when he should have zagged and tore all 3 ligaments out of his left knee. They had no spare band conductors who were qualified. They had 3 guys at university training. They had another guy on long service leave who was living it up in Portugal somewhere. And so I landed and met the principal director of music, the lieutenant colonel in England. And he said, "Oh, congratulations, you're taking command of this band in a little town called Lympstone." And I went, Okay, cool. I didn't know what to say. I was jet lagged. I had no idea what I was in for, but it was a wonderful time and really highlighted for me the similarities and differences, as you mentioned in your intro, of the military band um, way of doing business, the processes, the performance standards, the repertoire. All of that is so similar worldwide, and I've been lucky enough to see that firsthand through that 4 month exchange, being in charge of a 55 piece band over in England.
Definitely want to get to the conducting side of things here in a little bit, but first you spent
Mm.
your time, as a player, as you mentioned, as a flute and a piccolo player. And I just have to say, I live with two flute players. My wife and my daughter both play the flute. I have a little bit of flute PTSD. I'm going to try to make it through this conversation, but living with two flute players is definitely. Told my son, you can't play the flute. I can't have three flute players in the house, so it just it is what it is. But on a serious note, we've all had, well, hopefully we've all had really good flute players. We've all had poor flute players. And first thing I want to talk about is tone. So I learned a long time ago that we're looking for a dark tone on flute in general. And that I was taught that if you develop the low register on the flute, then the high register tone will come. So do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? And then how do we help students achieve that? I guess would be my question.
Okay. Yes, I do agree with that. I think for young flute players, particularly, it's a little bit, dare I say, I'm probably going to get shot from trumpet players around the world here. It's a little bit like trumpet. Young flute players just want to play high.
Mm-hmm.
They desperately want to get into that third octave in a ledger line territory. But I think if we spent more time in the bottom octave of the flute, the third octave would become richer, actually a little bit sooner. Young flute players never use enough air. They have no concept of how much air it actually takes to drive a flute and to have a beautiful sound. And the other thing I wish, and I guess this would be a magic wand thing, and I understand there's socioeconomic limitations a lot of times on families providing the first instrument for their student musician. I kind of wish that we provided all learner flute players, young learning flute players, with really good head joints,
Mm-hmm.
because they make all the difference. Being able to get that instrument really vibrating with really good quality metals in the head joint. Doesn't have to be 14 karat gold, but a lot of student flutes are nickel plated alloys that they don't sing, they don't talk. So that'd be the magic wand moment. But yeah, teaching them how to breathe is everything. Flute takes more air than most other instruments because we lose 60% of the air that we use. So little of the air is actually used in producing sound because it's a fipple where the airstream's divided.
Mm-hmm.
So relatively so little of the air is going into the instrument compared to a closed mouthpiece like a brass mouthpiece horn or trumpet or
Right, right.
trombone. Um,
When my wife was in
so
college, she was told, like, she was working on her low register and she was working on her phrasing, and her teacher said, you need to go run, you need to up your cardio, because
yep.
that was going to help her with her lung production.
Yeah, and my first flute teacher, one of the first exercises she ever got me to do was she gave me a sheet of paper, just we would call it A4, just a standard letter size paper, and would have me stand with the paper against a wall, and I would be maybe, I don't know, maybe 4 inches in the old language from the paper, and we'd have to blow on it using a flute embouchure. And see how long we could hold it against the wall before the paper fell. And she did it very carefully, and I never understood why. She kept saying, well, just do this 2 or 3 times and I'll get you to sit down, until the first time I fainted and landed on my face. A good lesson for all beginning flute teachers. Always do breathing exercises sitting down if you can,
Yeah.
because we use so much air. But yeah, absolutely. Breathing is everything. If you can learn to breathe really well and be super efficient about the way you use your air as well. One of the things, while I'm thinking of it, one of the things I've taught many, many flute students, and I still mention as a conductor quite regularly doing clinics and adjudication clinics, where you're adjudicating a festival or something, and then you run down on the stage and you do a quick 10-minute clinic with the
Yeah.
band. It's not an uncommon practice. We do it quite a bit over here. I always say to wind musicians, one of the tricks to being a great wind musician is to learn to turn off the signal from your brain that you need to breathe in. Because while you're playing an instrument, your brain will tell you that you're running out of oxygen and your death is imminent long before you actually need to breathe in. So if you can get used to kind of playing for much longer than your brain thinks it can, which we're always capable of, it's literally impossible for you to entirely empty your lungs. A healthy person can't do that. So, your brain will tell you, pick a number. So you might have played a note for 15 seconds as a young player, and your brain will go, alarm, alarm, we've got to breathe, we've got to breathe. And you can go, yeah, no, I'm going to breathe in a minute. I'll get there. Just wait. I'm still playing. Here's the end of the phrase. Now I can take my breath and move on. So learning to deny that switch in the brain as early as possible also seriously helps.
I was also a band director for, I don't know, 6 or 7 years before I heard that you could do lip slurs on the flute, that you could do the octave slurs on the flute, and that it had a similar, purpose as you do on the trumpet. So I always do that with our students as well.
Yeah, any of those flexibility exercises are super important. And flute is a little bit unique in the woodwinds because it's the only one really that doesn't kind of have either a speaker or a register key for clarinet or an octave key. Nearly all of the others have that. So much so that even with some fairly advanced flute students that I've had over the years, a little, I guess, mental trick, and your flute playing audience will know this really well. So any of the notes, so B flat, short B flat, or B natural or C sharp. If we're going to overblow that octave, I actually use the A flat key or the G sharp key as kind of as a pseudo octave key. It has no function. It doesn't affect the pitch. It doesn't do anything, but it just convinces the brain that we're going to play the octave now at this specific split second in time. And I've used that to really good effect. It's very much a placebo, but for some reason it works really well.
That's cool. Any other common things you see or tips regarding either articulation or hand position?
Hand position. I see way too many young flute players with inline ring key flutes. There is no functional reason in terms of sound production to force the left hand to be turned around far enough for that fourth finger, the wedding ring finger, if you will, to sit in line with the other fingers. I see that quite a lot, and I always think to myself, your life would be so much easier and so much less stress on the left arm, left wrist, left shoulder, if you just got an offset G key.
So just real quick for people who haven't heard it, the G key just is a little further down, so your hand position is easier. Why do they make the inline? I guess would be the question I have.
Well, that's a fantastic question.
Is it cheaper to put them in line than it is to move that G a little bit, even on a beginner flute?
I don't think so. I think it's really probably from tradition. Transverse flutes back in the day before we had all the keys, and you can go back into the Brock period, flutes had 3 keys or 4 keys. Bohm was the famous person who invented the current key system, if you will. And I think it's just tradition, honestly. But there's really, and look, I'm really happy if you've got listeners out there that know more about this than I do. I'm really happy to defer to greater knowledge. But I see a lot of young students who have a lot of tension in the upper body, and it's from that hand position, and it's from having to force the left hand to rotate all the way around there. When I bought my flute a couple of years ago, the flute I'm using now, obviously I could have bought any flute I wanted. I'm a grown-up, blah blah blah. I bought an offset G key. I bought a lovely power made in Boston, by the way. A little plug for American flutes. And but yeah, I bought an offset G just because it keeps my left arm and the left side of my body just is more relaxed.
Yep.
Posture is a really big issue with flutes. We're one of the few instruments that are held in a transverse way, so horizontal to the ground, 90 degrees to our spine, if you like. I see a lot of twisting, a lot of rotating. The old bugbear of the kid flute player who sits there with their right elbow tucked behind the chair.
Man, I hate that.
I will in a clinic even. I will stop a rehearsal and go fix the posture. I mean, obviously we don't put our hands on the student,
Yep.
but I'll literally stop a rehearsal for this and just say, "Sorry, everyone, this is a safety matter," and teach the student, and then look at their teacher with big eyes, going, "Come on, guys, you got to be across this."
Yeah.
We can inadvertently do quite a bit of damage to young bodies if we're not careful getting that posture correct. And making sure that the flute players have got enough space between their chairs. This is another one. You can line up nine trumpet chairs and have the chairs 4 inches apart. That will work. You can't do that with flutes.
Yeah, I kind of liken the flutes to the French horns, right? They just need that space. Yeah.
Yeah, they really do. And as soon as you squash them up, their posture just turns to complete rubbish. And what we're doing when we're allowing incorrect or improper posture, particularly with young bodies, is we're just increasing the likelihood of strain and repetitive strain injury later on in life.
And I can't imagine the person whose ear their flute is going into appreciates it. It seems like you as a flute player would want the space so you don't have a left ear that's got a flute in it.
Yeah, I mean, the majority of the sound, apart from the very lowest notes, the majority of the sound doesn't come out the end of the flute. It comes out directly in front. But yes, you certainly don't. Well, the other one too is if the room's quite cold, you will get it. The end of the flute will drip. And I think I've just said enough on that topic.
That's enough. Yeah. So from a conductor standpoint, I have my thoughts, but I want to hear what you have to say first. When you're thinking about the flute section, when do you put the flutes on the conductor right, or when do you put your flutes on the conductor left, or when do they get their own row, or what? I know it changes band to band, but do you have any sort of thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, I kind of don't. I cop out on this question. I get it a lot. If you Google how to set up a wind ensemble, you'll find about 12 million entries. Numerous people have done PhDs on this. Pershing zone and the president's zone set up differently. So it really, for me as a conductor and as a conducting teacher, my preference personally is to have the flutes on my left. I'm a right-handed conductor, but I really, because I actually like to cue flutes more often than not with my cueing hand rather than the stick. And I have dear friends and colleagues who are professional conductors who will say, "Man, you never set flutes on the left. They've got to be on that other side." And they're hard over about that, Look, I don't think it matters too much as long as they've got enough space, as long as you're thinking about who they're playing with. I like to have, first flute needs to sit next to oboe and hopefully in front of first alto sax and in front of first trumpet. So we kind of have that area of primary melody players because they very often play together or in melodic harmony. So as long as they can hear, so I sort of think about setting a band up in terms of rows of melodic or harmonic. I like to put all of the low clarinets, low reeds, low brass, string bass, and timpani all on my right-hand side, sort of down that right-hand corridor. So they all sit together. And so you can get it helps with intonation. It helps with understanding that weight of sound, that gravitas that we ask for a lot in wind ensemble music from the bottom end of the band. But yeah, as long as the flutes have got enough space to work really well, and the front row has the strong players in it, I think that's about as far as we need to go down that rabbit hole.
The way I tend to do it depends on A, the size of the flute section, and B, the quality of the flute section. So there was one year where I had 45 in a concert band and 15 of them were flutes, and 2 of them were decent. and the other 13
Oh,
were not. So it was
so
like three rows of flutes. I had a flute sitting next to a tuba player kind of thing. So they were on my right so that their sound would go kind of backstage and kind of into the band a little bit. But when I've
yeah.
got smaller sections or better sections, like you, I typically like to have them on the left so that they can be heard. I just know people who have not even heard about thinking about which side they're on, depending on, how you want to balance them. So,
Mm.
like last thing you want to do is take a flute player with a really bright out of tune upper register and put them right on the end where they're like, it's like putting the weakest French horn player in the end. It's like, I don't
Yep.
know, just trying to balance the band a little bit best you can.
Yeah, and look, every section we have those considerations. I mean, the vast majority of my conducting time, certainly in the Navy bands, in a 50-piece wind ensemble, I would have had three flutes,
Right.
a specialist first, a specialist second, and a doubler. Um, I always sat the doubler actually closest to the oboe in the middle because the piccolo is best hidden a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it can be very, very powerful and very bright. We played a lot in old Gothic churches and quite resonant spaces. So again, you're right. You need to consider how resonant that sound is. Is it super bright? And obviously, they all played in tune. These guys are pros.
Yeah.
They've been playing piccolo for 25 years. You're probably pretty good at it.
So when you say the doubler chair, you mean they play flute and piccolo?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry. Yeah. I glossed over
Well,
that.
somebody had a similar comment, but it was on the middle school side of things. Like I think it was Rachel Maxwell said this on our episode. She said, "When I have an oboe player and they're brand new, if they're bad enough, I'll put them in the fifth row. Like I'll put the oboe player back as far as we need to, depending on their quality." So obviously, we're talking about different levels of musicians here, but moving them around to make the setup work for your kids.
Yeah, absolutely. And with younger ensembles or less experienced ensembles, it's got to be about what's best for them. If possible within a section, I don't like to always put all of the first players in the front row, all of the second players in the second row. But then again, I also don't always like to put all of the strongest players on the first parts.
Right.
Something I'd used to really good effect in the Navy band over the years. I'd find the player who had the best low and middle register, particularly in the clarinet section, for example, and I'd make them, play third because that's where they're going to spend most of their time. And you need to have that experience base across all parts of all of the sections.
Yeah.
And maybe that comes from the fact that I was always a doubler. So I never played first chair in the Navy band, except when I was the only one for a little while, the only flute in a smaller group. So, I have a special affinity for those of us who actually make music happen, and they're the doublers and the second and third chair players.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people like that and would like to do that. And in some sections you can, but then if it's your trumpet section and you're playing stuff where the kids who play third literally can't play that high, or you got clarinet players who can't play over the break yet, it's like, well, so it's kind of within reason.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing about less experienced groups. It's always got to be about them. That servantile leadership thing that we talk a lot about in our world. And there's lots of glib little sayings around that. Things like conduct the band you have, not the one you wish you had. Mm-hmm. We've always got to keep in mind that this 90% of the conductors on earth, their job is to teach. They're not going to get to Carnegie Hall. They're not going to run the president's own. They're not going to make six figures as a pro conductor. There's a remarkably few of those jobs as a proportion. So it's whatever we need to do to get the kids to learn effectively and permanently and in an artistic way as well, to make sure, we're creating beautiful musicians as well as good little humans. And we can do all of that. I mean, standing on a podium is so powerful. You've got the ability to teach all of those things to kids or even in a community setting to older musicians as well, but lesser experienced players.
And programming is exactly the same thing. Not programming the music you want to play, program the music that you want to play for those kids. The people who just walk through a week before rehearsal, like they go through their library. I like that one. I like that one. I like that one. Let's go. That planning ahead, making sure it works, for where your kids are and where you want them to grow to. I think that sweet spot is something that it took me a long time. I feel like I'm there, but again, I always want to get better, being able to kind of peg the right kind of literature for those kids. Not overprogramming.
Over programming is a great disease for which we haven't found a vaccination yet. Unfortunately, I see it all over the world. The really wise band directors understand some version of the 20-60-20 rule, where 20% of your music should be music that they can play very easily and is super confident, and that might be Pharrell Williams' Happy, or that pop tune transcription thing. 60% should be material that they need to work on and has been chosen with intentionally to teach something to them, and 20% should be perhaps even just a tiny bit out of reach, but making them reach to something. And if you talk to enough conductors, you'll hear variations of that. Some will say 30-40-30.
Mm-hmm.
Some will say the proportions change, but fundamentally that idea of programming and the proportions of that sort of music is pretty standard worldwide for those who know what they're talking about.
Yeah, because what it allows you to do is achieve mastery. You allow these kids who are in 7th grade or 8th grade or 12th grade or whatever to sound like the recording at their level, to actually get to blend and intonation and expression, and not just, hey, we got through it. I have a teacher friend who said, yeah, people used to say they'd play X piece, but it didn't sound like that piece. It was just in their folder. Right. So just allowing them to go for mastery, and that helps with the culture of a band too. If the kids are used to sounding good the majority of the time, that's somewhere they want to be. Whereas if they come home to the dinner table and they're like, yeah, I got lost in band again today, I have no idea where we are, but we just keep going, like that's not for a good culture.
Yeah. And that's how we lose them. I think that's one of the ways we lose them.
Yep.
Sadly, I think we sort of plow on and kids get left behind because the adult wants to achieve something. And look, I'll acknowledge there's a lot of pressures in the education system, a lot of pressures on teachers. The need to perform at that school assembly or at that ceremony or graduation or whatever it might be. But one other thing I would say, and I'll put on my publisher hat, because as some of your listeners might be aware, I also run my own publishing company now, and I've got, I don't know, 25 or 30 Australian composers that write wonderful music that crosses my desk every day, and I help get that out into the world. We can't trust publishers. I'll give you a great example. Eric Whittaker's piece, stunning piece called Sleep, is listed, I believe, as a grade 3. And it's all half notes and quarter notes. Cool. You'd need a hell of a grade 3 band to even go close to making it sound nice, let alone to making it sound like something that Eric would love. I've played that with professional groups who have struggled a little bit to make that really resonate and really say something poignant to the audience. So don't trust the publishing company. Publishing companies are also in a lovely habit of saying, oh, this piece is, look, it's probably a grade 4, but you know what, I'll sell more copies of it if I make it a grade 3.5. We all, I would dare I say, we all do that to a greater or lesser extent. So the band directors have to be really vigilant to check if there's an online, a study score available, or if there's a score preview on YouTube or something like that. Actually get in and have a read of it, have a look at it, and make sure that it's going to fit your ensemble. Perthshire Majesty was a piece that you mentioned in it while we were chatting before we started. I've got a feeling that's like a grade 3. But I strongly advise, if you don't have a beautiful soprano sax player, and that's like saying I found Elvis at the supermarket, don't take it on. It's tough. If you're lucky enough to have that fabulous young musician, and I've seen a few groups in Australia that have had them, then by all means do it. If you've got that kid that can play a soprano in tune, they'll give them a job.
At the same time, when you're looking at scores, I've had band directors tell me that whenever they can peruse the physical copies, they always look at the parts, because there's lots of times when you love a piece. I'll just say it. One of the pieces I love, Albanian Dance, Shelley Hansen. It's a great piece. If you're doing an honor band that's 3 days long, have you looked at the trombone part? It's a great piece, and I'll do it again. But you have to think about the kid and what they're actually looking at. So sometimes looking at the parts will help you match up this part to those kids as well. And then, if enough of the parts don't match up, it's really not for your kids right now.
Yeah, and things like that are why when we're running honor bands and they have a number of different names, different guises around the world, but they're all the same sort of thing. It's why us conductors have to bring 6 or 7 pieces to make sure we have 4 that we can play in the concert.
Mm.
I do one in Hobart down in Tasmania, right down the south end of Australia, nearly every October, and I take 7 pieces to make sure I've got 3 for the concert. And it just really depends on the group. That's a bit of a different kettle of fish too, because you're walking into a group, you get handed 42 musicians. You've got no idea what standard they're at, really. The organisers say, yeah, we're a grade 3 ensemble. Yeah, okay. An hour into that rehearsal, I might agree with you, and chances are I might not.
Yeah. So for people doing honor bands, under program, if anything, and make more music.
Yeah, absolutely. Find pieces. If you think you're going to run a grade 4 ensemble, great. Find beautiful, stunning, interesting, artistic grade 3 music, and spend your weekend finding moments of beauty rather than doing what we call the hygiene of band directing, where you're stopping every 30 seconds to say, Flutes, there's a G sharp in bar 81. We don't need to be doing that stuff in honor band. We need to be finding beauty in the music. And look, I on Facebook, I am connected with a lot of American band conductors, right through from elementary school folks, right through to people like Julie Giroux and I could name drop as hard as you like, Frank Kelly and Jason Noble and Jerry Junkin, some of the big names, and they're programming stunning music. It's not the world's most complex music always, but there's always, if you go through and listen to the pieces that they've put up in there, the obligatory honor band conductor post where they've got the 4 scores on the desk next to the cup of coffee is my office for the day. We've all done those posts because they're fun. But if you go through and listen to that repertoire, you'll find more often than not the really good guys and girls who are running on honors ensembles are programming music that is just so beautiful. But the musicians also have to work a little bit to create that beauty. It's not really automatic.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, personal opinion, I think that's the best sort of wind ensemble music, where we have to reach for it a little bit. But then when we finally reach to it and we grab hold of that moment of great beauty, that's what makes it all worthwhile.
Yeah.
People often say, being a musician is all about the applause. I disagree entirely. The moment's done when the applause starts.
Yeah.
Yeah, that moment we live for is actually the beauty in the middle of the piece. It's not the end.
I remember a conversation with Eugene Corporon at University of North Texas. This was 15 years ago at the convention they do in the summer. And he said, we have thousands of recordings out there on YouTube and CDs and records and everything. And you all know our recordings. Don't try to make your band sound like my band. And this is what got me. He said, we didn't even sound like that. We had a recording engineer, and we edited stuff and we made it like as perfect as we could. He said, we didn't even sound like that. Now we're talking about gradations here, right? So of course they sound spectacular, but for him to say, we don't even sound like that. Don't try to get your band to sound like that. That's like that ego check we all have, right? You hear this piece and you're like, this is attainable. We want to make it sound like that. And if we can come close, then that's good. But don't beat yourself up if you don't get all the way there, because they didn't even sound that way.
And isn't it amazing that somebody of the caliber and the life experience of a Gene Corcoran can be so upfront and honest about that?
Yep.
Huge props to him for even making that comment. And look, I recommend some of Gene and North Texas wind ensembles recordings for some repertoire. I think they're incredible. Some of the ways that he and that ensemble have approached certain pieces, no names, no court martials, certain pieces over the years, I don't think I would use them as reference recordings. Broadly speaking, the British stuff and the Australian things, so a lot of the Granger, the Holsts, I would respectfully disagree with some tempo choices. I would respectfully disagree with some balance things. But we only know what we know. I was brought up on a staple diet of Granger and Holst and Vaughan Williams, and the British and Australian thing is particularly strong, strangely enough, in Australia. Gene would probably respectfully choose not to listen to a recording I've done of something that was written by Copeland, or or even to Kelly, to be more contemporary, and that's perfectly okay too. We've got this great diet out there, this great smorgasbord of recordings, but we've got to be really smart about it and go, oh, is that really a good recording?
Mm.
If so, what's good about it? If not, what do we disagree with and why? And it's okay to disagree, but it has to be intentional. We've got to have a reason for it.
So let's steer our conversation a little bit towards the actual conducting side of things, because, a good conductor or a great conductor is different from a good or a great rehearser. And then sometimes somebody's
Oh, yeah.
a great rehearser, but not a good conductor, or vice versa. But then the time you get somebody who's a great rehearser and a great conductor, then you've hit the home run, right? Then those people are really the best, conductors, if you will. And you've seen enough bands throughout your career, and you've seen everything from school band conductors, especially, right? So, what are
Yeah.
some of the things that we fall into as conductors that actually harm the music of our students, but we don't know it because we're worried about the students so much? We're not like thinking about ourselves, right? So, let's have some conducting advice.
Okay. The biggest piece of advice I'd give, and it's not an original thought. I stole it because we all steal like artists from smarter people than us. That's part of our art form as conductors. The biggest piece of advice, and this sentence has changed my life from the day I heard it. The main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. And I just think that's a statement of brilliance. It's so easy to fall into the trap of thinking that as conductors, particularly in a final rehearsal and then a performance, of thinking that we have to manage everything. We don't. If we work really hard in the early part of the rehearsal process, our workload, or our perceived workload, really should reduce markedly when we get towards performance. And our job in performance, and I know I'm oversimplifying, but I'm doing it deliberately. Our job in performance is to protect the confidence of the players sitting in front of us, whatever that takes. The more we can smile in a performance, the better everyone in the room is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
I see so many conductors who are working and visibly working so hard to drag their students through this piece of music, and nobody in the room's having fun. Mums and dads are not having fun. The principal's going, "Oh my God, I wish I was at the football." Um, it just it's fraught. But I think, yeah, we need to always be conscious as conductors. What do we need to control? And Bob Reynolds, H. Robert Reynolds, teaches a concept called the come to me game. And it's about the times when we have to grab hold of the attention of the ensemble and times when we can just let them play. And in performance, particularly, like, final couple of rehearsals and then the performance, the more time we can spend just letting them people play, whether it's an elementary school band, elementary band, and they're playing a little grade 1.5 Randall Standridge March, or whether they're, a college outfit playing to Kelly's Blue Shades, or everything in between. The less conducting we can get away with doing, I think, the better late in the process. We've got to, at some point, make the musicians understand that we're not responsible for tempo beyond the upbeat. We're not responsible for most of the things in a performance. We're a guiding tool. We're there to make sure that key moments are controlled, is the wrong word, are managed. Excuse me. And beyond that, the responsibility lies with the musician standing in front of us. So be someone who's going to help them rather than trying to control all 300 bars of that piece of music, 300 measures. And don't forget to reward them. If you give a nice clear trumpet cue and the trumpets come in and hit that note, smile at them, nod at them. Give them. I'm not akin to giving them a little thumbs up, where you give them a little thumbs up in front of your chest where the audience can't see it, particularly with younger groups. Pros don't need that, but if you're running a first or second year band, give that oboe kid a little thumbs up and a big smile if they come in at the right spot. Why not? We all crave. We're humans. We crave positive reinforcement. Yeah, so I mean, they're the most important things, I think, understanding when we need to be in control or managing each measure or entry or part of the music, and when we don't. And when we don't, stay out the way.
Hmm.
Let them do it. Let them understand. Even in a first or second year group, there's no reason in a rehearsal you can't stop conducting and have them continue to play and let them work out. Okay, I don't have a conductor now. I've got to listen to the snare drum or I've got to listen to the tubas. Um,
Because
those.
the great teachers are moving around the room too. They're a moving target.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And gone are the days where conducting was about being that dictatorial, terrifying um, taskmaster at the front of an ensemble that never stepped off the box. I think those days are gone. There's better ways to do human interaction. There's better ways to teach and look after our people, grow our people in our art form.
And I think getting off the podium in rehearsal helps with the biggest thing that I see, which is overconducting. That
Oh yeah.
my kids are slowing down, so I must conduct bigger. Well, then because of how the skeleton works, when I conduct bigger, I also slow down, which also slows them down. So then I have to conduct bigger, and then by the time they're not slowing down, you're still conducting bigger, right? So
Yeah.
I think we've all been taught this, but we forget it because we're thinking about the kids all day long. Like how many times do you get to school? Like I actually got to school once when my kids were little, and I was wearing my slippers. Like I forgot to put my shoes on,
No.
but my kids were safe and they were at daycare, so we went the day with slippers. But same thing musically, you're there, you're not thinking about yourself, you're thinking about what can I do for my students, you know. So
Mm.
the minute you need them to watch you more, just like if you whisper, they'll listen harder, right? Conduct
Yeah.
less, conduct smaller. I always think about that when they're dragging. I purposely will conduct smaller to make them watch. But that
Yeah.
conducting bigger thing, man, we all do it from time to time. And I think,
100%.
it's like we conduct with the shoulder or the elbow. It's like, how about just the wrist? How about just the fingers? It does a lot to the
Mm.
kids.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's a little bit like in the composition space, and I do a few little things. Obviously, I shouldn't say obviously. I am also a composer, and I have the privilege of my music always gets selected by a publishing company because I run it.
Mm.
I don't write a lot these days. I'm actually working my way through writing my second symphony as we speak. But when I'm talking to younger or less experienced composers, particularly for wind ensemble, the first thing I teach them is to get really comfortable with the delete button. If you can't work out why that section's not working, go through and find three things you can delete.
Mm.
And for me, it's a little bit the same in conducting. If you're struggling, and it's a physical struggle to conduct your ensemble, find something you can delete. Do less. It's such a golden rule, and we all do it. I would suggest every conductor at some point has had to eat a lot of painkillers because their right shoulder's sore, or they get that lovely twangy nerve problem in the back of the right side of the neck because we're conducting constantly from the shoulder and it's all this heavy weight stuff. Um, and people like to use batons that are 3 feet long
I
because
learned
they,
a I
they,
learned
they think it'll be easier to see.
I learned a lesson from this. It's like the trying to conduct tension free when you're listening to bad music. I mean, it's easy if you're listening to like the Royal Navy Band, like it might be easy to this is just let's just make this because it sounds beautiful. But if you're listening to a bad middle school band or a bad high school band, you're gritting your teeth because like I don't want anything to do with this. Like this sounds awful. It's my job to fix it, but they need to play right now, so we're conducting. So if you're hearing something that you're not pleased with the tone, especially, I tell
Yeah,
I tell band directors, get rid of the tension in your body. Just purposely conduct with less tension. It's not going to fix how they play. They're still going to
yeah,
sound terrible, but
yeah, yeah, yeah.
at least
They're still going to be awful.
you'll feel better at the
Yep.
time that you have to fix it, and you'll have more to bring to them.
Yeah, and when I'm teaching conducting, and I do quite a bit of teaching by Zoom. I mean, Zoom's been a great invention for those of us who teach freelance. Um, the first thing I teach is that if you find at any point in a rehearsal that your left hand, assuming you're right-handed, your left hand has grabbed hold of your right shoulder
Hmm.
or up here, activate the wrist. Make the conducting wrist move. because when we activate the wrist, the shoulder shuts down because it's not needed anymore. And that's the quickest. It's 100% effective, 99% effective. I don't want to sound like a shopping channel kind of buy two, get a set of steak knives. But it's a miraculous quick fix to body tension in conducting. It's just get the right wrist going, get your conducting hand wrist moving. It fixes so many ills.
It's also clearer. It's also clearer for the ensemble because they can see where the beat is.
Totally. Yeah. And look, I've been really fortunate over my time conducting. I've had some incredible conducting teachers, lecturers, mentors, friends that have taught me things like, if you're practicing working your way through a score and you're doing the mechanics of meter changes or whatever it might be that you're working on at home with your headphones on, do it in a way that your eyes can follow the tip of the baton. Because if our eyes as conductors can't follow the tip of the baton because it's moving and it's scattered and it's moving flat out and it's all over the shop, what chance has our poor oboe kid in the front row got? What chance has the timpanist got who's standing 40 or 50 feet away, at the back corner of a stage somewhere because they forget to use their pedals and don't tune their drums? But it's that keep the main thing, the main thing, and the KISS rule. Do less. We just all overdo it. And overconducting for me is a little bit like the trumpet kid that puts a dart on the end of every note. The kid. You've seen and heard the kid. It's that kind of thing. Yeah, but that's the disease of overconducting. And as you rightly said, I've been guilty of it. You've been guilty of it. I'm sure the great conductors, I'm sure Gene Corcoran and Jerry Junkin and, Bob Reynolds and these guys, at some point in their lives, they've sat down in the coffee room after a concert and gone, man, I overconducted the hell out of that. Maybe I can just calm the farm and not do so much next time. I'm sure they've had that thought at some point, for sure. Because it's one of the things that we learn, particularly as professional conductors. So when I was conducting, for example, the Sydney Navy Band, a long time ago now, about 9 years ago, I would be conducting. I'd be actually on the podium in front of the musicians for 15 to 20 hours a week. Sometimes more if we were doing a really big, important thing, a huge concert or a really complicated program. We might do 20, 22 hours of actual conducting, and that's an enormous load on the body. If you're not careful, you can end up doing real damage to your body. But if you're doing that amount of upper body work with tension only in one side of the body, asymmetry that's a bad problem for conductors. We get all sorts of trouble there. So, but even if you are a band director who's only doing 2 hours a week or 3 hours a week, that's still enough time of repetitive motion to create actual physical injury and problems if we overconduct and don't think about the body mechanics of what we're doing.
And something we could probably help fix a little bit if we stretched before rehearsal. But I'm sorry, I never think to stretch before rehearsal. It's like, let's set up the chairs, or maybe they're doing that today, but there's always 1,000 things to do. And me stretching my shoulder is not something I ever think of. Maybe that's something I want to improve at.
No, me either. And I know remarkably few band directors out there who think. And look, I think it comes from a good place. 5 minutes before we start a rehearsal, we're probably helping that young oboe player to find a good reed, or we're probably dealing with that kid, I won't name a section because I'll show clear bias, who comes up and says, I've left my folder at home. Can I get another set of the charts for today? Percussion. There you go. I said it out loud. Or, we see that a child's upset or a young person's struggling with something. That kid who's always the center of attention and got lots of friends are suddenly sitting by themselves. We'll go and do pastoral care with that person rather than stretch our own bodies and look after ourselves.
Yeah.
Band directors are the ultimate givers, but we pay a price for it.
We sincerely appreciate you taking your valuable time and listening to the Growing Band Director podcast. Your students are very lucky to have a band director like you. If you have any suggestions for episode topics or think you have an area of expertise to share on a show with us, please reach out. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your band director friends to subscribe as well. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our YouTube channel, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening to The Growing Band Director. See you next week.